A lot of you guys are worried about the potential for war in Taiwan. Now, I've made my position clear. I don't think anything other than the status quo is going to prevail at the end of the day. However, I did find some interesting pieces of information that I do want to share with you guys in this video. And so guys, as you smash that like button, let me run the intro. What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. This is one that's very interesting. I'm going to start with a little bit of a background and then move into sort of what I saw the CCP say and then what the Taiwanese people are saying about the potential unification of China. So if you look over here, this is the first exhibit I have for you guys. This is an article where Xi Jinping actually said that he wants China and the US to find ways to get along better. And you guys are aware, this article came out on October 27, 2022, and this is damage control to the more war hawkish comments made at the Congress meeting by President Xi about Taiwan. And what were those comments? Well, he said that he essentially believes that there's foreign interference in Taiwan and said that China would never renounce the right to use force to unite the island with the mainland. And so effectively, in my opinion, that was very like a war hawkish type of move or position. At least that's what it sounded like. And so, of course, that reduced the valuations for the shares in China. And, you know, there was a lot of issues as it relates to people moving their money out of China as a result. And so, you know, I held steady because I didn't think that anything was going to end up materializing from this. And luckily we were right. They sort of like tried to walk things backwards as a result. And here's what I mean. You can see that the presidency did come out afterwards and say that as major powers, strengthening communication and cooperation between China and the US will help to increase global stability and certainty and promote world peace and development. And so once again, that's his way, I believe, of pushing to reduce tensions. Now, I have showed you guys this on the channel before, but I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a background as to the direction that we're going in this video. And, you know, Xi added that China was willing to work with the US to give mutual respect, coexist peacefully, and find ways to get along in this new era. And you guys see the note that I just put in the bottom left here. This would absolutely be a Charlie Munger approved statement by President Xi Jinping. And I think it's a move in the right direction. And some of you who are not actively following this might actually be new to the conflict and what has transpired over the past year or so. And so here's a quick summary for you guys. Notice that tensions began, or I guess accelerated or re-accelerated between Beijing and Washington following China's launch of unprecedented military operations around Taiwan in August, when House Speaker Nancy Pelosi paid an unannounced visit to, of course, Taiwan. And Beijing saw that as a violation of its sovereignty and held massive military activities, including firing missiles, some over the island nation. And of course, you know, there's 24 million people that are living in Taiwan. And once again, Taiwan has maintained its independence since 1949, while Beijing has pursued a policy of reunifying the island with the mainland, including by force if necessary. Now, here's where I do have to pause, and I do have to admit my ignorance here. I am not a geopolitical expert. I am just a guy who's good at modeling and investing. But sometimes you really have to understand your history and be really knowledgeable about the geopolitical tensions, which I admittedly am not an expert of. And so what I'm going to show you guys next is what the CCP did say at the UN, and I'm going to provide commentary. However, I do have to admit that it's coming from a place of slight ignorance because I'm just learning, or at least just over the last 3 or 4 years, I'm really learning about the history of the conflict between the US and China. And so here's the transcript, and I encourage you guys to look this up on your own. And, you know, we'll dive right into it. And so they start off by saying that the Taiwan question is at the heart of China's core interest, and the Taiwan question is growing into the biggest risk in China and US relations. Should it be mishandled, it's most likely to devastate our bilateral ties. They said that Taiwan is part of China's territory. It has never been a country. In 1895, Japan launched an invasion against China and forced the then Quang government to cede control of Taiwan. It was an episode of humiliation in the history of the Chinese nation. So they are telling you that when they lost Taiwan as a result of Japanese interference, it was seen as a great humiliation to the country. So it doesn't look like China's ever going to give up on its one China policy. In 1943, the governments of China, the United States, and the UK issued the Cairo Declaration, which stated in explicit terms that all of the territories Japan stolen from the Chinese, such as Taiwan and the Penju Islands, shall be restored to China. So now they're saying that they have a precedent here where America and the UK already agreed that those pieces of land belong to China. So if there's any approach by the UK and America to suggest that these areas should remain independent, then they're going back on that Cairo Declaration. Now, here's where I want to pause, and there's a lot of you guys who know a lot more about this than I do. Please let me know in the comments. Now, they go on to say that the UN General Assembly Resolution 2758, adopted in 1971, not only resolved once and for all the representation of the whole of China, Taiwan included, within the United Nations, but also eliminated any room for creating two Chinas or one China, one Taiwan in the international community. So in other words, they're telling you that as of the 70s, the UN would not recognize Taiwan. Now, they went on to say that successive US administrations have clearly reaffirmed their commitment to the one China policy, and several US presidents have stated their opposition to Taiwan independence, albeit they're probably just doing it because they don't want to start any international conflicts. But I do think that this has been something that's been simmering for a while. Notice they're saying that not long after the China and US established diplomatic ties, the US side went back on its word and passed the Taiwan Relations Act, followed by the so-called Internal Six Assurances, constantly fudging and hollowing out the one China principle. So they're effectively telling you why they're angry. They're effectively saying that America has gone back on its word. And they make a pretty decent point here. Just as the US will not allow Hawaii to be split away, China has a right to uphold the unification of the country as Taiwan as part of China. It is also clearly stipulated in China's constitution: peaceful reunification and one country, two systems. This fundamental guideline best meets the overall interests of the Chinese nation, including the Taiwan compatriots, and represents the most practicable and inclusive solution to addressing the difference in system between the mainland and Taiwan. Such a solution is peaceful, democratic, of goodwill, and benefits both sides. And I think the media neglects this point. It looks like they want to maintain the status quo with reunification. What I mean by that is I've never read an article where in sort of like the Western media where it says that China's reunification policies over Taiwan include the fact that they want to maintain the two systems. Now, a lot of you guys will say that any sort of hopes of maintaining a two system went away when they just completely took over Hong Kong. And, I'm not an expert here. You guys let me know in the comments if that was China's tell as to how they're going to treat Taiwan. Are they actually going to support a two-system approach, or are they just going to roll over them and just completely take it over as a one China thing? You guys let me know what you think in the comments below, if that were to ever happen. And they go on to say that we reserve the option of taking all necessary measures. And so checking separatist activities for Taiwan independence, upholding territorial integrity, and safeguarding peace in the Taiwan Strait is the sacred right that China exercises in accordance with domestic and international law. So they're telling you straight up that this is not something that they're going to back on. So the item that I've been talking about previously about, China and the US working together, and there are discussions happening, there doesn't seem like there's a solution here that the Chinese and the Americans would hold as acceptable. I mean, China does say, one China, two systems, and I would like to hope that that's the direction that they would want to go, but I'm not really sure, and it's mostly just because of my ignorance of not just being an expert in what they're really saying, despite what they say publicly. Now, what do the Taiwanese people think? That's, I think, the most important thing, because, everyone talks about what America wants and what China wants, but what do the Taiwanese people really want? Well, there was a survey done in June of 2022, and I just want to show you the results. And so you can see here, the survey has been done every year, actually, about the Taiwanese people's view towards unification. And notice that if you just add up the people who've said that they want to maintain the status quo and decide at a later date, or currently maintain the status quo and maybe move towards independence at a later date, or maintain the status quo indefinitely, you're covering approximately 82% of the population. So effectively, what this chart is saying is that approximately 82% of the population does not want to unify right now. And the only part of the population that wants unification as soon as possible is that bottom line here, this red line, where it's showing that, you know, it's never hovered more than around 2%. And I would throw in this pink line as well, you know, where they're saying that they don't really want to respond. That might actually be people that actually want unification, but they're just not willing to say it. So you can argue that maybe like, you know, 8% of the population as a whole wants to unify, but of course 82% of the population as a whole doesn't want to unify. Now, I'm very interested in what you guys think. The other thing that I'm interested in is, do you guys have materials that could help us understand this geopolitical conflict even more? And so if you can, link it in the comments below. And once again, if you don't have anything that you can add, drop a meow in the chat just to help with the algorithm. Now, I recently put out a video about potentially Alibaba's inside man, who's number 2 in the CCP at the moment. If you've missed that video, no problem. You can get to it right here.